there were some notes I had made on therapy, the role of the therapist. Those are important things, and I think it would be important, like in a workshop, to specify those things more. Because we've been working on these things for a couple of years now. And certainly, I don't think none of this is our easy task, but I don't think they're insurmountable. They're just change-oriented, and that sometimes is not easy. These are just basic, simple guidelines for actions. And they do, in fact, correspond to methods. Definitely. One of the methods most is those of Paulo Freire, an educator. His method of developing concientización. We need to examine how we can use some of Freire's logic and methodology to work in the area of therapeutic interventions. I think there's a rich area there for us to gain from. And I'm not here to give you, sorry to say, a manual on the house. I wanted to give you a vision of where to. A few examples. We would concur that we are energized by the work of Ignacio Martín Baró, Salvadorian Jesuit priest, brilliant Salvadorian Jesuit priest, psychologist, murdered by the military junta in El Salvador in 1989, November 16, 1989, who has been, or who had been, for many years, articulating about the need of psychology for liberation. And that he has worked on some elements for reconstructing psychosocial health of Latinos, and pointed out the need for a new vision, critical epistemology, and a new practice, so that the besieged subjectivity of our peoples is provided with the participatory challenge of writing their own history. Towards this, he identifies 3 urgent tasks. I will mention 2. He firmly believes in the need for the recovery of historical memory. I mentioned this. And it's helpful for me to know that this is a point that has been supported by Latin American theorists. I want to bring it to this country. I don't think it's being worked on here. Unfortunately, south of here, you don't get what's going on. There's a lot of interesting things happening in Latin America. It's not your usual standard psychology. There are interesting projects going on all over Latin America. Okay, with much less resources than ever could have from this country. Much less resources. And are doing interesting projects. No big academics, no big. Just based on reality and what reality is telling them they have to do to help people change. Okay? But when Ignacio Martín Baró talks about the recovery of historical memory, what does that have to do with mental health? What has that to do with psychosocial health? Okay? It has a lot to do. It has to do with recovering one's sense of identity, of collectivity, pride in one's people. Okay? And it's not that hard to incorporate. Let me just give you one example, which I didn't realize I was doing about 7 years ago in this country, that I understood it when I started to read it conceptually and theoretically. A couple of years ago, I sponsored a youth workshop. And one of the things I did was, and I have it available for people interested, was I was talking about, in fact it was in Marseille where I gave it. It was talking about the importance of recreating the history of these youth so that they can feel clearer about who they are. And these are bilingual youth whom, for most, do not speak Spanish, speak English. Okay? And what I did with the group was, I was using family pictures, I was using historical pictures, pictures of people, to help them reconstruct who their peoples had been. Okay? They had no sense of history. They had no sense of whom they were about, what they were about. It was absolutely interesting, fascinating process to see these kids, okay, start to just kind of awe when they started to learn. It's a learning process, simple, about the histories of their family, the histories of their people. Oh, I didn't know that. It's an aha experience, you know. I didn't know that so-and-so had happened, and this had happened, and this had, yeah, nobody, they didn't teach us at school, and then I quit school, okay? It starts to help people develop a sense of, hey, well, wait a minute, I'm something. Most of our kids out there don't think they're nothing, okay? And we know that. They feel it. We have to help them feel there's something, but we need to help them feel there's something with something. We need to have an anchor. We need to have a conceptual base. And what I'm saying to you, recovery from memory. Because what happens in colonialized countries, and this has happened in Puerto Rico, they try to sever the memory of what's happened before. The struggle in Puerto Rico, for example, this happened in Indian communities. The true history of a people. You need to have a sense of pride, a sense of history, to have a sense of self. And that has to do with mental health. Okay? So we need to regain history to also regain selfhood in our people. But in Puerto Rico, for example, to be brief, up to almost the 70s, I think it was, and correct me if it's, yeah, 70s, let's see, 60s. 60s, I guess. People didn't know much about the feminist movement, the early feminist movement. They didn't know much about the worker movements of the 30s and the 20s, because lots of our history books stopped in 1898, right? That's interesting. Oh, good old Miller's history book stopped in 1898. What happened to Puerto Rico after 1898? Okay? There was, of course, that's changing now, but that changed in the 70s and the 80s. But for a period of time, okay, there was no memory, collective memory. It was collective amnesia, right? That's very dangerous for people to not know where they come from, who the people they relate to were. And I know, just to, another example of the use of family pictures, I'm sure family therapists here have used family pictures in their therapeutic process. When you start to use those family pictures, when they bring you boxes, you know, because they don't have albums, I mean, you know, usually boxes, right, maletas, and they bring you these maletas and these boxes. They say, bring me all the pictures, forget it, you bring me everything that you have in the house and we'll look at it and we'll organize it. And then the kids get around, and the kids haven't seen the pictures of their parents, of their grandparents, of, you know, when you start reconstructing that family history, you are regaining history. You are regaining a sense of strength, a sense of that family self. That's very potent stuff, let me tell you. Very potent stuff.